Hello, everybody. I the song was stopping, and I was gonna start the stream, and then it was like, "Would you like an ad?" And I was like, "Maybe I'll let it play a little bit longer." But yes, hello to anybody who is here. So FYI, I am feeling rather frustrated, and it's not over anything that important, and I think mostly it's just like this overall mood that I've been in that is crappy, since last night. So it's that, and then, some dumb stuff that has set me off tonight. But I have noticed that it seems like most of the time that whatever brain space I'm in, once I stream, I get into a totally new brain space. That is what I'm looking for tonight. So I am hoping that doing this will get me out of this. Almost got jump scared by my own hand. um, that doing this will get me out of this sucky, frustrated headspace and make me feel much better. If it's not working, then I might have to, stop the stream early. But I wanted to say that just in case, my reactions seem a little more terse than usual, then it's just because I'm hopping on the stream, not feeling in the best mood. But yeah, hopefully this will make me feel better. But yeah, it has been a little bit since we have read Pride and Prejudice. Just noticed the camera doing weird things. It's been a while since I read Pride and Prejudice, and last time Mrs. Gardiner confused me greatly, because she was explaining to Lizzie that, hey, you might look like a gold digger if you go after Mr. Wickham. And I was very confused by what the situation there was, because it seemed like earlier they were saying the whole message of the book is basically, yeah, find you a guy who's rich. And so I didn't realize that he was literally right about to come into a great fortune, and so if you marry him right as that happens, yeah, that's not gonna look so great. So that was mostly what was going on last time we read, as far as I remember. Let's see. Oh yes, we must. Not out, in. And then you can go over there. Okay. Yeah, so what did I last see? Oh, right. Lizzie was saying, I don't think I've ever been in love. Like, I wasn't actually in love with Mr. Wickham. So I don't know if anyone's here, but can you once again let me know if you like, well, So the thing is, the light provides more light, but I see a little bit of like a visual warble, and I was like, I hope that's not there on the actual YouTube video. And it is. So in the last stream. And so nobody mentioned it last time, so maybe it doesn't bother you guys that much. I can deal with it. I'm fine with it as well. It's just a little bit annoying. And so to me, this is perfectly readable, and there's no warble. There's just a little bit of shadow from the camera. So I'm thinking I might go with this today, but please feel free to say in the chat which one you prefer, and for anybody watching the VOD, feel free to say, in either in the in like the video discussion or like in the comments in YouTube or whatever, which one you prefer, and I can, continue forward. I might be able to use another light and see if that works, but I have to go downstairs and get it, and so I don't know if it's worth it at this particular moment. So yeah. But anyway, so yeah, Elizabeth was saying, I don't think I was actually in love with Wickham. I don't know that I've ever been in love. And so it's like, ooh, that's poetic and spicy, and I like that. But yeah, let's just hop to it. I don't think there's a way to get rid of that shadow because it is the camera itself. I don't know, man. I really don't know what's more annoying, the shadow or the warble. I don't even know if that's what you call it. But let's just try it for a bit with this. So it does say 4 up here, but it's chapter 4 of part 2, so it's chapter 27. If I did my math right. But let us begin. Chapter 27. Actually, since... hang on just a second. I want to, because I don't have anybody in the chat right now, I want to make sure that everything sounds okay. I did do a sound check first, but I want to do another one real quick. Oh, hey! That's it is here! Yay! Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I don't know if you heard, you might have just arrived, so I don't know if you heard my question. But so we have 3 lighting options. One is this. And the biggest problem with this being that it's a little less bright and there's a shadow. Option 2 is this, which is brighter, which gets rid of the shadow. But I see a little visual warbliness to it, which nobody complained about last time, but to me is more annoying than the shadow. So there's that. And then option 3 is I could go try and grab a light from downstairs, but, that's going to take me a sec. So do you have a vote, Death's Head, for either of the 3? I guess maybe I'll read a paragraph and let you let you think on it. Okay, chapter 27. With no greater events than these in the Longbourn family, and otherwise diversified by little beyond the walks to Meryton, sometimes dirty and sometimes cold, did January and February pass away. March was to take Elizabeth to Hunsford. She had not at first thought very seriously of going thither, but Charlotte, she soon found, was depending on the plan, and she gradually learned to consider it herself with greater pleasure as well as greater certainty. Absence had increased her desire of seeing Charlotte again, and weakened her disgust of Mr. Collins. There was novelty in the scheme, and as with such a mother and such uncompanionable sisters, we'll come back to that, could not be faultless. A little change was not unwelcome for its own sake. The journey would moreover give her a peep at Jane, and in short, as the time drew near, she would have been very sorry for any delay. Everything, however, went on smoothly, and was finally settled according to Charlotte's first sketch. She was to accompany Sir William and his second daughter. The improvement of spending a night in London was added in time, and the plan became perfect as plan could be. Just says I don't really care. Fair enough. I want to try the other light. Well, wait. Let me check something before I commit to that. Okay. There is a mess of cables back here. But yeah, let me real quick. I'll put on some tunes and let me try the other light just to at least give it a shot. This one. Oh, yeah. I think that's a lot better. Hello, Mako Cam. Welcome, welcome. Yeah, that one doesn't have the visual warble. That's so weird that, like, I don't know. I don't know what it is about this particular light that has that problem, but this other one seems completely fine and gives you a great view with no shadow. So I think we're gonna go with this one. It does make me suddenly orange. In the video game I've been playing, when the characters get blighted, they have red around them, and so I kind of look like I am going into my third boss phase right now. But anyways, okay. Now we can actually talk about that first paragraph we read. So let's see. I love those. Sometimes dirty and sometimes cold. Did January and February pass away? That is often how they do pass away. And then I'm not remembering quite well, but I'm assuming that Hunsford is, where Collins and Charlotte and Catherine are. Because they, had letters about that. Absence had indeed made the heart grow fonder. And I like the more important than making the heart grow fonder, it made her a little less disgusted by Collins. Oh, that is fair. And it's weird she says uncompanionable sisters. I guess she doesn't like Lydia and Kitty. Which I didn't know. I thought the sisters got along just fine. It was just the parents that had favorites, but I guess the sisters have favorites amongst themselves. And I like that. Give her a peep at Jane. Okay. The only pain was in leaving her father, who would certainly miss her, and who, when it came to the point, so little liked her going that he told her to write to him and almost promised to answer her letter. Almost promised. I feel like that's something you can pretty easily promise. The farewell between herself and Mr. Wickham was perfectly friendly, on his side even more. His present pursuit could not make him forget that Elizabeth had been the first to excite and to deserve his attention, the first to listen and to pity, the first to be admired, and in his manner of bidding her adieu, wishing her every enjoyment, reminding her of what she was to expect in Lady Catherine de Bourgh, and trusting their opinion of her, their opinion of everybody, would always coincide. There was a solicitude, an interest which she felt much ever attach her to him with a most sincere regard, and she parted from him convinced that, whether married or single, he must always be her model of the amiable and pleasing. Nobody has said anything against that model so far, so I guess that's totally fine. He certainly seems like both those adjectives, and it is interesting that they have the same opinions. Our fellow travelers the next day were not of a kind to make her think him less agreeable. Sir William Lucas and his daughter Maria. Oh yes, now we have the other sisters, the other siblings that we haven't known about until recently. A good-humored girl, but as empty-headed as himself, had nothing to say that could be worth hearing, and were listened to with about as much delight as the rattle of the chase. Or, I don't know if I'm saying that right. Elizabeth loved absurdities, but she had known Sir William's too long. He could tell her nothing new of the wonders of his presentation and knighthood, and his civilities were worn out like his information. So I guess he's the kind of guy that tells the same stories over and over. Oh, I don't know if I mentioned this directly before, but I think one of the reasons that this book became such a beloved classic is because Because of the narrator. that the narrator, it's like it is this like omniscient narrator that can, go into different people's heads and different scenes and stuff, and like the narrative voice is like always throwing shade and stuff like that, and it's like, oh yeah, good humored girl, empty head is as himself, and there's a ton of little comments like that, and it just makes the story more enjoyable to read. I don't often prefer omniscient, but if you're gonna do omniscient, this is a great way to do it and make it really work. Alright. It was a journey of only 24 miles, and they began it so early as to be in Gracechurch Street by noon. As they drove to Mr. Gardner's door, Jane was at the drawing room window watching their arrival. When they entered the passage, she was there to welcome them, and Elizabeth looked earnestly in her face. Okay. Was pleased to see it healthy and lovely as ever. That phrasing just threw me for a second. Because I usually hear that phrase as at her face, and I assume it's just an older way of saying that, but it's like earnestly in her face kind of thing. Alright. On the stairs were a troop of little boys and girls whose eagerness for their cousin's appearance would not allow them to wait in the drawing room, and whose shyness, as they had not seen her for a 12-month, prevented their coming lower. Okay, so, like, I guess it's just describing the way kids can be, like, really excited and come closer, but also shy, and so not, like, they come closer, but not enough to be like, hello, Elizabeth, dear cousin, how are you doing? All was joy and kindness. The day passed most pleasantly away, the morning in bustle and shopping, and the evening at one of the theaters. Elizabeth then contrived to sit by her aunt. Their first subject was her sister, and she was more grieved than astonished to hear, in reply to her minute inquiries, that though Jane always struggled to support her spirits, there were periods of dejection. I think that's saying that Jane always tried to, like, lift up everybody around her, but, she's feeling rejected by Bingley, and so she has her moments. It was reasonable, however, to hope that they would not continue long. Mrs. Gardner gave her the particulars also of Miss Bingley's visit in Gracechurch Street, and repeated conversations occurring at different times between Jane and herself, which proved that the former had, from her heart, given up the acquaintance. Mrs. Gardner then rallied her niece on Wickham's desertion, and complimented her on bearing it so well. I wouldn't call it a desertion. Elizabeth just kind of quietly removed her name from the hat. I don't remember the voice I gave her. But my dear Elizabeth, she added, what sort of girl is Miss King? I should be sorry to think our friend mercenary. Pray, my dear aunt, what is the difference in matrimonial affairs between the mercenary and the prudent motive? Where does discretion end and avarice begin? Last Christmas you were afraid of his marrying me, because it would be imprudent, and now, because he's trying to get a girl with only 10,000 pounds, you want to find out that he's a mercenary. If you will only tell me what sort of girl Miss King is, I shall know what to think. She's a very good kind of girl, I believe. I know no harm of her. But he paid her not the smallest attention until her grandfather's death made her mistress of this fortune. Okay, I might be into round 2 of confused. Because I thought he came into the fortune, and that was the point, is that he was about to get a big fortune. And so marrying him, like, right after that makes you seem like you're marrying him for money. Which almost everybody is, but, it's a little more imprudent in this particular case. But now it seems like it's saying that she had the fortune, and he married her for the fortune, which would not make any sense as to why she would warn Elizabeth not to marry him, because she'd look like a gold digger. If he's the gold digger, Okay. No, why should he? It was not allowable for him to gain my affections, because I had no money. What occasion could there be for making love to a girl whom he did not care about, and who was equally poor? I'm really curious, because, like, this, in Dracula, in the Lucy's letter, she said, like, oh, like, he like, made all sorts of love to me, and it was pretty clear that it was saying, like, oh, he said lots of, he professed his love to me, basically. And so I wonder if in the past that phrase just literally meant, like, a more literal interpretation of sharing your love, saying your love, kind of thing, and it grew to become what we know it to mean today, or if it was both things back then. I'm curious. Whom he did not care about, but who was equally poor. There seems indelicacy in directing his attentions towards her so soon after this event. So I guess they maybe they both came into a fortune. I don't have as much energy today as I did the other time, so I'm not gonna expend too much energy freaking out about it. But well, to keep going. A man in distressed circumstances has not time for all those elegant decorums which other people may observe. If she does not object to it, why should we? Her not objecting does not justify him. It only shows her being deficient in something herself, sense or feeling. Well, cried Elizabeth, have it as you choose. He shall be mercenary, and she shall be foolish. No, Lizzie, that is what I do not choose. I should be sorry, you know, to think ill of a young man who has lived so long in Derbyshire. Oh, if that is all, I have a very poor opinion of young men who live in Derbyshire, and their intimate friends who live in Hertfordshire are not much better. I'm sick of them all. Thank heaven I'm going tomorrow, where I shall find a man who has not one agreeable quality, who has neither manner nor sense to recommend him. Stupid men are the only ones worth knowing, after all. Take care, Lizzie, that speech savours strongly of disappointment. Yeah, I think she is expressing her disappointment. Careful, Lizzie, I'll think you're disappointed. I am disappointed. Hold on. Yeah, I don't feel like I understand the situation enough to really comment. But I do feel like I get what Lizzie is ranting about. That like Mr. Darcy and Mr. Bingley and now they're speaking ill of Mr. Wickham, and so it's like all these people from this area aren't seeming so great, and so she's kind of, you know, hyperbolizing and lamenting about that, which is funny. Before they were separated by the conclusion of the play. What play? I'm sorry, what? What play? Hold on. Maybe it's not an actual play. Hold on. Yeah, I don't know if it means like conclusion of just their words and kind of using it, you know, strange language to describe that, or if they are actually at a play. Hold on. Oh, okay, I found it. So, like, they pass most pleasantly away, the morning in bustle and shopping, and the evening at one of the theaters. So even when the setting is described, it's described in a way that confuses me. So I took this to mean like, oh, yep, they did this, they did that, now they're home and talking. Not, hey, this is evening, we're at the theater. And yeah, it says, like, she contrived to sit by her aunt. The first subject was her sister. the first subject should be the play. Like, I guess maybe plays were different at the time, but in today's, culture, you don't talk during a play. You sit quietly and don't, and turn off your phone and everything. And so I definitely would not think, yes, she sat by her aunt, and the first subject was her sister. That is for a different time. Oh, boy. Okay. Before they were separated by the conclusion of the play, she had the unexpected happiness of an invitation to accompany her uncle and aunt in a tour of pleasure which they proposed taking in the summer. "We have not quite determined how far it shall carry us," said Mrs. Gardiner, "but perhaps to the lakes." No scheme could have been more agreeable to Elizabeth, and her acceptance of the invitation was most ready and grateful. "My dear aunt," she rapturously cried, "what delight, what felicity! You give me fresh life and vigour. Adieu to disappointment and spleen. What are men to rocks and mountains? Oh, what hours to transport we shall spend." I thought that was a metaphor for a second, but I think she's literally saying, we're going to look at cool rocks and mountains. Oh, that's funny. What are men to cool rocks? I don't know, man. Like, usually rocks would be the epitome of uninteresting, I think. Mountains are plenty interesting, but unless it's like a gemstone or, as I said, a cool rock, I feel like men are more interesting than rocks. I will give them that. I'm just imagining, like, I feel like if you were playing a game of, like, weird quotes, I mean, I don't know, maybe you could guess, but this would be such a fun quote to, like, have, like, say, what are men to rocks and mountains? Guess where this is from. And I guess maybe you could guess it's from Pride and Prejudice because it is talking about, like, men and romance and stuff. But it's not what I expected to hear today. Alright. I also, so disappointment and spleen, and that makes me think of how in Moriarty it's like translated as when they're like, I need to vent. They say, I need to vent my spleen, and it happens a couple of times, and I like the line, but when it happened the second time, I was like, is this just a weird translation? And now hearing that, it makes me think maybe that was an expression at the time of, like, your spleen is where your frustrations lie. Alright. Oh, what hours of transport we shall spend! And when we do return, it shall not be like other travellers, without being able to give one accurate idea of anything. We will know where we have gone. We will recollect what we have seen. Lakes, mountains, and rivers. Don't forget the rocks. It shall not be jumbled together in our imagination, nor when we attempt to describe any particular scene will we begin quarrelling about its relative situation. Let our first effusions be less insupportable than those of the generality of travellers. What? Hold on. So I guess she's saying, like, people will come back from their travelers and they'll be like, oh, what did you see? What was your favorite part? And it'll be like, we saw lots of stuff. It was great. And she's like, I am going to tell you all about the specifics of the rocks I saw. I don't know if this is some, like, metaphor for, like, their gossip about the guys, and it's like, oh, you know, we won't be talking about this, we'll be talking about this. But I'm not quite sure. Alright. Chapter 28. Every object in the next day's journey was new and interesting to Elizabeth, and her spirits were in a state for enjoyment, for she had seen her sister looking so well as to banish all fear for her health, and the prospect of her northern tour was a constant source of delight. When they left the high road for the lane to Hunsford, every eye was in search of the parsonage, and every turning expected to bring it in view. The paling of Rosings Park was their boundary on one side. Elizabeth smiled at the recollection of all that she had heard of its inhabitants. At length the parsonage was discernible. The garden sloping to the road, the house standing in it, the green pales and the laurel hedge, everything declared they were arriving. Hey! Some setting! Nice. Mr. Collins and Charlotte appeared. I mean, they would be Mr. Have they been married yet? I think they have, right? Yeah, because it just, like, breezed past it. It was like, yeah, the wedding happened. But yeah, so it's Mr. and Mrs. Collins now. I love that she still, or at least the narrator still separates them. Mr. Collins and Charlotte appeared at the door, and the carriage stopped at the small gate, which led by a short gravel walk to the house, amidst the nods and smiles of the whole party. In a moment they were all out of the chaise, rejoicing at the sight of each other. Mrs. Collins welcomed her friend with the liveliest pleasure, and Elizabeth was more and more satisfied with coming, when she found herself so affectionately received. I'm pretty sure it's not meant to sound this selfish, but it just sounds like, oh, I feel better about coming now that you complimented me. or maybe a more charitable thing would be like, oh, you like me? Oh, that's nice. I feel like it's somewhere in the middle. But anyways, she saw instantly that her cousin's manners were not altered by his marriage. Not great to hear. His formal civility was just what it had been, and he detained her some minutes at the gate to hear and satisfy his inquiries after all her family. I mean, that's fair. It's been a hot minute since he's seen your family. He's allowed to ask. They were then, with no other delay than his pointing out the neatness of the entrance, taken into the house, and as soon as they were in the parlour, he welcomed them a second time, with ostentatious formality to his humble abode, and punctually repeated all his wife's offers of refreshment. Okay, that sounds more like the Collins we know. Elizabeth was prepared to see him in his glory, and she could not help fancying that, in displaying the good proportion of the room, its aspect and its furniture, he addressed himself particularly to her. Okay. As if wishing to make her feel what she had lost in refusing him. But though everything seemed neat and comfortable, she was not able to gratify him by any sigh of repentance, and rather looked with wonder at her friend that she could have so cheerful an air with such a companion. When Mr. Collins said anything of which his wife might reasonably be ashamed, which certainly was not unseldom, she involuntarily turned her eye on Charlotte. Once or twice she could discern a faint blush, but in general Charlotte wisely did not hear. Hold on. Interesting. After sitting long enough to admire every article of furniture in the room, I could totally imagine Collins being like, and here's my favorite armchair where I write my sermons, and here's the desk I got from my great-great-grandfather, and here's the bookshelf that I got from Pottery Barn, you know. After sitting long enough to admire every article of furniture in the room, from the sideboard to the fender, to give an account of their journey and of all that had happened in London, Mr. Collins invited them to take a stroll in the garden, which was large and well laid out, and to the cultivation of which he attended himself. To work in his garden was one of the most respectable pleasures, and Elizabeth admired the command of countenance with which Charlotte talked of the healthfulness of the exercise, and owned she encouraged it as much as possible. I mean, that's fair. You know, Collins has his faults, but get you a man who can garden. That's a good quality in a man. I prefer man who gardens over man who parties all night. I'll say that. That is a fair thing to encourage. The way through every walk and crosswalk, and scarcely... Did I miss something? Oh, here, leading the way through every walk and crosswalk, and scarcely allowing them an interval to utter the praises he asked for. Yep, again, very much sounds like Collins. He's talking so much that they can't even offer him the genuine praise that he wants. Every view was pointed out with a minuteness which left beauty entirely behind. So he does. Oh, this is so funny. I don't know. I have not seen any of like the movies or anything of that sort, but I would love it if, and I'm sure that this would take too much screen time, but this would be so funny to see in the screen, just like inside the house. It's like, here's my favorite armchair. Here is. What did I say? Here's the desk I got from my great-great-grandfather. Here's the bookshelf from Pottery Barn. And he, like, here's the Xbox that I broke in rage one time. And he just goes to excruciating detail. And it's like, here's the pen I used to write my sermon last week. And then they're like, okay, that's finally over. Now we get to see the pretty garden. And he's like, here is this one azalea that I tended to for a very long time. And here's this, my favorite petunia. I call it Juniper. Not a confusing name at all. Just going in excruciating detail through all the flowers as well. That would be so awesome to see in like a visual medium. Anyways. He could number the fields in every direction and could tell how many trees there were in the most distant clump. But of all the views which his garden, or which the country, or the kingdom could boast, none more to be compared with the prospect of Rosings, afforded by an opening in the trees that bordered the park nearly opposite in front of his house. It was a handsome modern building, well situated on rising ground. From his garden, Mr. Collins would have led them round his 2 meadows, but the ladies, not having shoes to encounter the remains of a white frost, turned back. And while Sir William accompanied him, Charlotte took her sister and friend over the house, extremely well pleased, probably, to have the opportunity of showing it without her husband's help. It was rather small, but well built and convenient, and everything was fitted up and arranged with a neatness and consistency of which Elizabeth gave Charlotte all the credit. I don't know, man. Like, I feel like, especially if he is going into that detail, he might be the one who did that. When Mr. Collins could be forgotten, there was really a great air of comfort throughout, and by Charlotte's evident enjoyment of it, Elizabeth supposed he must be often forgotten. Huh. Interesting. I'm not quite sure what that means. If that means, like, oh, she does her own thing a lot, or she purposely ignores him a lot, or... I'm not quite sure. She'd already learned that Lady Catherine was still in the country. It was spoken of again while they were at dinner, when Mr. Collins, joining in, observed, "Yes, Miss Elizabeth, you will have the honour of seeing Lady Catherine de Borough on the ensuing Sunday at church, and I need not say you will be delighted with her. She is all affability and condescension, and I doubt not but you will be honoured." Whew, I doubt not but. That is quite a lot of negatives in one sentence. Okay, wait, go back. I doubt not but you will be honoured with some portion of her notice when service is over. I have scarcely any hesitation in saying that she will include you and my sister Maria in every... Oh, sister-in-law, okay. And my sister Maria in every invitation with which she honours us during your stay here. Her behaviour to my dear Charlotte is charming. We dine at Rosings twice every week, and are never allowed to walk home. Her ladyship's carriage is regularly ordered for us. I should say one of her ladyship's carriages, for she has several. You didn't need to say that. I don't think you should say it, but okay. Lady Catherine is a very respectable, sensible woman indeed, added Charlotte, and a most attentive neighbour. Very true, my dear, and that is exactly what I say. She is not the sort of woman whom one cannot regard with too much deference. The evening was spent chiefly in talking over Hertfordshire news and telling again what had been already written, and when it closed, Elizabeth, in the solitude of her chamber, had to meditate upon Charlotte's degree of contentment, to understand her address in guiding and composure in bearing with her husband, and to acknowledge that it was all done very well. She had also to anticipate how her visit would pass, the quiet tenor of their usual employments, the vexatious interruptions of Mr. Collins, and the gaieties of their intercourse with Rosings. A lively imagination soon settled it all. Anyways. Okay, yeah, so this is all stuff she's meditating on. But yeah, like, that is fair. I too would be like, I am glad to see her happy, but I'm also, like, doubting it too. But I really do hope she's happy, that if she really is, that'd be very nice. About the middle of the next day, and she was in her room getting ready for a walk, a sudden noise below seemed to speak the whole house in confusion. And after listening a moment, she heard somebody running upstairs in a violent hurry, and calling loudly after her. She opened the door, and met Maria in the landing place, who, breathless with agitation, cried out, "Oh, my dear Eliza, pray make haste and come into the dining room, for there is such a sight to be seen. I will not tell you what it is. Make haste and come down this moment." Could you imagine somebody, like, because you can just leave it at, there's a sight to be seen, and just leave it at that and drag her along. But specifically saying, "I will not tell you what it is," it has a certain vibe. Like, just imagining somebody walking up my stairs, like, coming into my room and being like, "There's such a sight to be seen. I will not tell you what it is. Go see it." Elizabeth asked questions in vain. Fair. Maria would tell her nothing more, and down they ran to the dining room, which fronted the lane, in quest of this wonder. It was two ladies stopping in a low phaeton at the garden gate. Okay, that makes it so much worse. So, I have not seen what's in the next line, and we'll see if it actually is worth this reaction. But just from that alone, like, now I'm imagining myself coming downstairs after this proclamation and being like, "Oh, what is it?" It's two ladies talking. And it's like, I could see that anytime that I want. You know, what makes this so significant? Yes, exactly. Okay, I just saw Elizabeth's response. "And this is all?" cried Elizabeth. "I expected at least that the pigs were got into the garden, and here is nothing but Lady Catherine and her daughter." The daughter that Mr. Darcy might be marrying? The plot thickens. Law, okay. "La, my dear," said Maria, quite shocked at her mistake. "It is not Lady Catherine. It is old Lady Mrs. Jenkinson, who lives with them." Okay, so now it sounds like, okay. Here's the situation. Somebody runs up the stairs, comes into my room, and is like, "You have to come quickly. Something's going on downstairs. I will not tell you what it is." I go downstairs. It's two ladies talking. It's the esteemed, lady that I have heard so much about. And it is the daughter who is potentially, I can't remember if she's explicitly betrothed, but it's like, I think they think it's probably gonna happen, but and her daughter who's betrothed to this dude I hate. And then it's like, oh no, it's not her ladyship. It's the old lady down the street. It's like, and that makes that more exciting. The other is Miss de Borrow. Only look at her. She's quite a little creature. Who would have thought she could be so thin and small? Didn't they say she was sickly or something earlier? It's not surprising. Oh my goodness. She's abnormally rude to keep Charlotte out of doors in all this wind. Why does she not come in? Oh, Charlotte says she hardly ever does. It is the greatest of favours when Miss de Borrow comes in. I like her appearance, said Elizabeth, struck with other ideas. She looks sickly and cross. Yes, she will do. That's so funny. Oh my goodness. Yes, she will do for him very well. She will make him a very proper wife. Oh my goodness, the shame. Oh, just imagine that. Now imagining the scene, like you come across this, thin, sickly, pale girl, and it's like, I like the look of her. And it's like, you do? She's gonna make a great wife for that bastard. That's amazing. Okay, let me try and read it again, because I think I just laughed through the whole thing, but... I like her appearance, said Elizabeth, struck with other ideas. She looks sickly and cross. Yes, she will do for him very well. She will make him a very proper wife. This is totally, if this were like, I don't know, an animated, like, I don't know why I thought of superhero series specifically, but just imagining, like, everything's normal. I like her appearance. She looks sickly and cross. And then it, like, her face is in shadow, and she's like, she will make a wonderful wife for him. And now I might have lost my place. No, I didn't. That was easy. Okay. Mr. Collins and Charlotte were both standing at the gate in conversation with the ladies, and Sir William, to Elizabeth's high diversion, was stationed in the doorway, in earnest contemplation of the greatness before him, and constantly bowing whenever Miss Deborah looked that way. At length, there was nothing more to be said. The ladies drove on, and the others returned into the house. Mr. Collins no sooner saw the two girls than he began to congratulate them on their good fortune, which Charlotte explained by letting them know that the whole party was asked to dine at Rosings the next day. Nice. I still don't get why that was such a big deal, though. Like, I guess it's a big deal that Lady Catherine's daughter showed up, that it's like... the esteemed, Lady Catherine's daughter graced us with her presence, but I don't know. I mean, the Collins is, like, dying with her, like, every other week or every other day. Let's see, so this is 29. Chapter 29. Mr. Collins's triumph in consequence of this invitation was complete. The power of displaying the grandeur of his patroness to his wondering visitors, and of letting them see her civility towards himself and his wife, was exactly what he had wished for, and that an opportunity of doing it should be given so soon was such an instance of Lady Catherine's condescension as he knew not how to admire enough. I confess, said he, that I should not have been at all surprised by her ladyship's asking us on Sunday to drink tea and spend the evening at Rosings. I rather expected, from my knowledge of her affability, that it would happen. But who could have foreseen such an attention as this? Who could have imagined that we should receive an invitation to dine there? An invitation, moreover, including the whole party, so immediately after your arrival. It is weird, the things that are actually put in dialogue sometimes, because I feel like all of this was just explained in this. And then there are other things, like I was talking about with how funny the furniture would be, that are just, like, summarized, where I'm like, I actually want to hear that in dialogue. Anyways. I am the less surprised of what has happened, replied Sir William, from that knowledge of what manners of the great really are. Okay. From that knowledge of what the manners of the great really are, from my situation in life, which my situation in life has allowed me to acquire. About the court, such instances of elegant breeding are not uncommon. So I guess he's saying, like, oh yeah, I'm a knight, and so I know, yeah, like, we noble people are so great. I don't know if knights are nobles, but I just mean it in terms of, like, I'm better than you all, and we're nicer than everybody too, kind of thing. Scarcely anything was talked of the whole day, or next morning, but their visit to Rosings. Mr. Collins was carefully instructing them in what they were to expect, that the sight of such rooms, so many servants, and so splendid a dinner might not wholly overpower them. When the ladies were separating for their toilet, he said to Elizabeth, "Do not make yourself uneasy, my dear cousin, about your apparel." Oh, so it sounds like, she's just going in, to change her clothes or powder her nose or whatever. And then he's like, don't be uneasy about how you look. And it's like, I wasn't, but I am now. And granted, coming from Collins, maybe I'm not, but, Lady Catherine is far from requiring that elegance of dress in us, which becomes herself and her daughter. I would advise you merely to put on whatever of your clothes is superior to the rest. There is no occasion for anything more. Lady Catherine will not think the worse of you for being simply dressed. She likes to have the distinction of rank preserved. While they were dressing, okay, no reaction to that. While they were dressing, he came 2 or 3 times to their different doors to recommend their being quick, as Lady Catherine very much objected to being kept waiting for her dinner. Such formidable accounts of her ladyship and her manner of living quite frightened Maria Lucas, who had been little used to company, and she looked forward to her introduction at Rosings with as much apprehension as her father had done to his presentation at St. James's. Not quite sure what that last sentence means. As the weather was fine, they had a pleasant walk of about half a mile across the park. Every park has its beauty and its prospects, and Elizabeth saw much to be pleased with, though she could not be in such raptures as Mr. Collins expected the scene to inspire, and was but slightly affected by his enumeration of the windows in front of the house, and his relation of what the glazing altogether had originally cost Sir Louis de Bourgh. I tripped up on that a lot, but I'm just, so if I understand that correctly, he's counting the windows. So maybe that's what it meant about the furniture, not like this is my favorite chair, but rather, here's chair number 1, bookshelf number 3, you know, that kind of thing. It's like, there are 15 windows. Isn't that cool? It's like, not really. Anyways, okay. When they ascended the steps to the hall, Maria's alarm was every moment increasing, and even Sir William did not look perfectly calm. Why did I, for a second, imagine, like, an actual alarm? Like, an actual alarm getting worse? But no, it just means, like, she's more nervous. Oh, but I'm just imagining now Maria having, like, some sort of internal alarm that's just getting louder and louder the more she walks along this extravagant house. So while they ascended the steps to the hall, Maria's alarm was every moment increasing, and even Sir William did not look perfectly calm. Elizabeth's courage did not fail her. She had heard nothing of Lady Catherine that spoke her awful from any extraordinary talents or miraculous virtue, and the mere stateliness of money and rank she thought she could witness without trepidation. From the entrance hall, of which Mr. Collins pointed out with a rapturous air, the fine proportion and finished ornaments, they followed the servants through an antechamber to the room where Lady Catherine, her daughter, and Mrs. Jenkinson were sitting. Her ladyship, with great condescension, arose to receive them, and Mrs. Collins had settled it with her husband that the office of introduction should be hers. It was performed in a proper manner, without any of those apologies and thanks which he would have thought necessary. True. I want to look up condescension because they're using it in. I feel like I can get what's going on from the context, but I want to see condescension. The actor instance of condescending. Super helpful dictionary. Voluntary assumption of equality with a person regarded as inferior. Interesting. Oh. Well, that makes way more... I'm glad I looked that up. That's definitely a compliment then. If she, like, assumes equality with a person regarded as inferior. That word usually means the opposite in today. It usually means I think I'm better than you. That's weird. That's like the original meaning of it is actually the opposite of, oh, like I am better than you, but I'm actually going to come down to your level and I'm going to, like, you know, I'm voluntarily donning equality with you. That's interesting. Okay. Let's see if I can go back as easily as I did before. Oh, that's the garden. Okay. In spite of having been at St. James's, Sir William was so completely awed by the grandeur surrounding him that he had but just courage enough to make a very low bow and take his seat without saying a word. And his daughter, frightened almost out of her senses, sat on the edge of her chair, not knowing which way to look. Elizabeth found herself quite equal to the scene and could observe the three ladies before her composedly. I don't know quite what equal means in this context, but it very much reads to me as like Flynn / Eugene in Entangled on the castle roof being like, I could get used to a view like this. That's it, I'm used to it. Guys, I want a castle. Like, it kind of reads like that. It's like, I could get used to a place like this. That kind of thing, which, oh, you are. What is it called? What is Mr. Darcy's place called? But I know it's, like, super fancy. Lady Catherine was a tall, large woman with strongly marked features, and which might once have been handsome. Oh, we throwing some shade on Lady Catherine? Are you saying she's not handsome anymore? Yeah, maybe once she was pretty, but now, her hair was not conciliating. Okay, well, I'm looking things up. Conciliating. Appeasing. Okay. To overcome with distrust or hostility of, placate, win over, to win or gain goodwill, to make compatible, reconcile, to become agreeable or reconciled. Okay. So it's saying like it's not agreeable actually. So her heir is it's not reconciling to them. Interesting. Nor was her manner of receiving them such as to make her visitors forget their inferior rank. Wait, now I'm confused on that phrasing. Is it saying like, oh hey, don't forget that you're less than me? Or if it's saying like, oh no, you are on the same level as me. Oh, looks like there's an ad break. Okay, wait. So let me like, yeah, her heir was not placating, I think might be a good replacement for that. So her heir was not placating, nor was her manner of receiving them such as to make her visitors forget their inferior rank. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I took the wrong definition of condescension, because if she is like, don't forget your place, peasants, then that sounds like the opposite of, willingly making yourself on the same level as your inferiors. I don't know. Seven, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Back. All right. She was not rendered formidable by silence, but whatever she said was spoken in so authoritative a tone as marked her self-importance. A what? Oh, and brought Mr. Wickham immediately to Elizabeth's mind, and from the observation of the day together, she believed Lady Catherine to be exactly what he had represented. I'm confused again. Because, like, maybe I'm forgetting what Mr. Wickham said. Maybe Mr. Wickham said something different from what other people said. But everybody has been saying that she's super nice and stuff like that. And this is not sounding so nice anymore. Anyways, when, after examining the mother, in whose countenance and deportment she soon found some resemblance of Mr. Darcy, she turned her eyes on the daughter. She could almost have joined in Miss Maria's astonishment at her being so thin and so small. There was neither in figure nor face any likeness between the ladies. Miss Deborah was pale and sickly. Her features, though not plain, were insignificant, and she spoke very little, except in a low voice, to Mrs. Jenkinson. in whose appearance there was nothing remarkable, and he was entirely engaged in listening to what she said, and placing a screen in the proper direction before her eyes. Okay, I wonder who Mrs. Jenkinson is now, because she seems more important than I thought she was going to be. She just sounded like the old lady down the street. So, okay, but, you know, Lizzie saying that she resembles Mr. Darcy seems to be saying that my reading is correct, that she isn't seeming so nice. After sitting a few minutes, they were all sent to one of the windows to admire the view, Mr. Collins attending them to point out its beauties, and Lady Catherine kindly informing them that it was much better worth looking at in the summer. The dinner was exceedingly handsome. Interesting they used that word for dinner, too. And there were all the servants and all the articles of plate which Mr. Collins had promised. And as he had likewise foretold, he took his seat at the bottom of the table, by her ladyship's desire, and looked as if he felt that life could furnish nothing greater. He carved and ate and praised with delighted alacrity, and every dish was commended first by him, then by Sir William, who was now enough recovered to echo whatever his son-in-law said, in a manner which Elizabeth wondered Lady Catherine could bear. But Lady Catherine seemed gratified by their excessive admiration, and gave most gracious smiles, especially when any dish on the table proved a novelty to them. The party did not supply much conversation. Elizabeth was ready to speak whenever there was an opening. She was seated between Charlotte and Miss de Borrow. Oh, right next to Lady Catherine. Or maybe it's the Miss thing again. Maybe that means it's the daughter. Okay, so it is the daughter. All right. The former of whom was engaged in listening to Lady Catherine, and the latter said not a word to her at all dinner time. Not a word to her all dinner time. Mrs. Jenkinson was chiefly employed in watching how little Miss de Borrow ate, pressing her to try some other dish and fearing she were indisposed. Maria thought speaking out of the question, and the gentleman did nothing but eat and admire. So I guess Charlotte and skinny little Miss Lady, it's Charlotte and Lady Catherine are talking, or at least Charlotte's listening to her, and then little skinny Miss Miss de Borrow is not talking at all. All right, and especially not to Elizabeth. And I'm curious if Mr. Darcy has said his affections towards Lizzie to Miss de Borrow and has turned her down already. That could make her, give her the silent treatment. Or maybe she just doesn't want to talk to anybody. We don't really know. When the ladies returned to the drawing room, there was little to be done but to hear Lady Catherine talk, which she did without any intermission till coffee came in. Didn't they just have dinner? Maybe it's decaf. Delivering her opinion on every subject in so decisive a manner as proved that she was not used to having her... She was not used to have her judgment controverted. I feel like... I feel like that should be having. Okay, she inquired into Charlotte's domestic concerns familiarly and minutely, and gave her a great deal of advice as to the management of them all. Told her how everything ought to be regulated in so small a family as hers, and instructed her as to care of her cows and her poultry. Didn't know they had cows. We just talked about a garden. Elizabeth found that nothing was beneath this lady's attention, which could furnish her with an occasion of dictating to others. In the intervals of her discourse with Mrs. Collins, she addressed a variety of questions to Maria and Elizabeth, but especially to the latter, of whose connections she knew the least, and who she observed to Mrs. Collins was a very genteel, pretty kind of girl. She asked her at different times how many sisters she had, whether they were older or younger than herself, whether any of them were likely to be married, whether they were handsome, whether they had been educated. what carriage her father kept, and what had been her mother's maiden name. Elizabeth felt all the impertinence of their questions, but answered them very composedly. Lady Catherine then observed, Yep, I'm seeing why Collins likes her. That sounds exactly like, this is my favorite desk. It's from 1954, you know. She's doing this with people and being like... Now I'm just imagining all of these in like quick succession. That is just like, how many sisters do you have? Are they older or younger than you? Are any of them likely to be married? Are they pretty? Have they had a good education? What carriage does your dad keep? What's your mother's maiden name? You know, it's just like, okay. It's like, none of the questions are particularly rude, but all of them in quick succession kind of is. Your father's, wait, hold on. Your father's estate is entailed on Mr. Collins, I think, for your sake. Turning to Charlotte, I'm glad of it. But otherwise, I see no occasion for entailing estates from the female line. It was not thought necessary in Sir Lewis de Borough's family. Do you play and sing, Miss Bennet? There she goes again with a new question that's totally unrelated. But you inherited the house. You have the house. So why are you saying like, ladies shouldn't inherit houses when you did? What? Do you play and sing, Miss Bennet? A little. Oh, then some time or other we shall be happy to hear you. Our instrument is a capital one, probably superior to a You Shall Try It Some Day. Okay, that felt incomplete. Do your sisters play and sing? One of them does. Why did not you all learn? You ought all have learned. The Miss Webbs all play, and their father has not so good an income as yours. Do you draw? She totally is doing that. No, not at all. What, none of you? Not one. That is very strange, but I suppose you had no opportunity. Your mother should have taken you to town every spring for the benefit of masters. Was that a common thing at this time, that the ladies of the house would learn to draw? My mother would have had no objection, but my father hates London. Has your governess left you? We've never had any governess. No governess? How is that possible? 5 daughters brought up in a home without a governess. They had parents who loved them, or you know, they love most of them, and luckily their tastes end up being opposites, so they end up being equally loved. I never heard of such a thing. Your mother must have been quite a slave to your education. Elizabeth could hardly help smiling, and she assured her that had not... Why am I tripping so much? She assured her that had not been the case. Then who taught you? Who attended you? Without a governess, you must have been neglected. Compared with some families, I believe we were, but such of us as wished to learn never wanted the means. We were always encouraged to read, and had all the masters that were necessary. Those who chose to be idle certainly might. Interesting. So that kind of goes back to her conversation with Darcy about them both liking books. And makes, you know, it's not just a hobby to her. Like, this is actually how she got her education. So that's interesting. So no doubt, but that is what a governess will prevent. And if I had known your mother, I should have advised her most strenuously to engage one. I always say that nothing is to be done in education without steady and regular instruction, and nobody but a governess can give it. It is wonderful how many families I have been the means of supplying in that way. I am always glad to get a young person well placed out. 4 nieces of Mrs. Jenkinson are most delightfully situated through my means, and it was but the other day that I recommended another young person, who was merely accidentally mentioned to me, and the family are quite delighted with her. Mrs. Collins, did I tell you of Lady Metcalfe's? Lady Metcalfe's calling yesterday to thank me. She finds Miss Pope a treasure. Lady Catherine, said she, you have given me a treasure. Are any of your younger sisters out, Miss Bennet? And, okay, I might have read that wrong, but she continues to, speed run questions. I don't know what she means by out. Yes, ma'am. All? What, all 5 out at once? Very odd. Maybe she means it literally, they're out of the house. And you only the second. The younger ones out before the elder are married. Your younger sisters must be very young. Yes, my youngest sister is not 16. Perhaps she is full young to be much in company. I don't know what that means. But really, ma'am, I think it would be very hard upon younger sisters that they should not have their share of society and amusement, because the elder may not have the means or inclination to marry early. The last-born has The last-born has as good a right to the pleasures of youth as the first. And to be kept back on such a motive, I think it would not be very likely to promote sisterly affection or delicacy of mind. So, interesting. So I guess Lady Catherine is saying, like, oh yeah, keep the younger sisters inside and, don't let them talk to dudes or get married before the older ones. And the Elizabeth is like, older sisters might not get married first. Maybe the younger sisters will. So let them socialize. I don't know what she means by such a motive, though. Upon my word, said her ladyship, you give your opinion very decidedly for so young a person. Pray, what is your age? My 3 younger sisters grown up, replied Elizabeth, smiling. Your ladyship can hardly expect me to own it. I don't know what she means by own it. Lady Catherine seemed quite astonished at not receiving a direct answer. Oh, I guess she's just saying, you can't expect me to answer that. And Elizabeth suspected herself to be the first creature who had dared to trifle with so much dignified impertinence. I'm just imagining the Collins making the kitty shocked face in the corner. You cannot be more than 20, I am sure. Therefore, you need not conceal your age. I am not 21. So, is that... I don't remember how to do their ages. Does that mean I'm not 21? When the gentleman had joined them... Who? Sir William? When the gentleman had joined them, the tea was over. The card tables were placed. Lady Catherine, Sir William, and Mr. and Mrs. Collins sat down to quadrille. And as Mr. Borrow chose to play at casino, the 2 girls... That was a game? Once upon a time? Okay. The 2 girls had the honor of assisting Mrs. Jenkinson to make up her party. Their table was superlatively stupid. Oh, their table was superlatively stupid. That is an amazing insult. Not just stupid, superlatively stupid. Scarcely a syllable was uttered that did not relate to the game, except when Mrs. Jenkinson expressed her fears of Mr. Borrow's being too hot or too cold, or having too much or too little light. Okay, so I guess Mrs. Jenkinson is maybe a servant. She's maybe the caretaker of the daughter, which would make sense as to why they would show up together. She's her caretaker, her chaperone. A great deal more passed at the other table. Lady Catherine was generally speaking, seems like that happens a lot, stating the mistakes of the 3 others, or relating some anecdote of herself. Mr. Collins was employed in agreeing to everything her ladyship said, thanking her for every fish he won, and apologizing if he thought he won too many. Sir William did not say much. He was storing his memory with anecdotes and noble names. When Lady Catherine and her daughter had played as long as they chose, the tables were broke up. The carriage was offered to Mrs. Collins, gratefully accepted, and immediately ordered. The party then gathered round the fire to hear Lady Catherine determine what weather they were to have on the morrow. From these instructions they were summoned by the arrival of the coach. and with many speeches of thankfulness on Mr. Collins's side, and as many bows on Sir William's, they departed. And as soon as they had driven from the door, Elizabeth was called on by her cousin to give her opinion on all that she had seen at Rosings, which for Charlotte's sake she made more favourable than it really was. But her commendation, though costing her some trouble, could by no means satisfy Mr. Collins, and he was very soon obliged to take her ladyship's praise into his own hands. Let's see, how long is the next chapter? Oh, very short. We can do that. Alright, so what is it, 30? So, I'm not remembering where we started now. Oh, no. I'll say chapter 30, but I don't know that it is. Part 2, chapter 7. Sir William stayed only a week in Hunsford, but his visit was long enough to convince him of his daughter's being most comfortably settled, and of her possessing such a husband and such a neighbour as were not often met with. While Sir William was with them, Mr. Collins devoted his mornings to driving him out of his gig and showing him the country. But I don't know what that means, driving him out of his gig. That sounds so modern again. But when he went away, the whole family returned to their usual employments. Elizabeth was thankful to find that they did not see more of her cousin by the alteration, for the chief of the time between breakfast and dinner was now passed by him either at work in the garden or in reading and writing, and looking out the window in his own book room, which fronted the road. The room in which the ladies sat was backwards. Elizabeth at first had wondered that Charlotte should not prefer the dining parlour for common use. It was a better-sized room, and had a pleasanter aspect, but she soon saw that her friend had an excellent reason for what she did, for Mr. Collins would undoubtedly have been much less in his own apartment had they sat in one equally lively, and she gave Charlotte credit for the arrangement. So she's trying to avoid him, and so she sits in like a dingy room. From the drawing room, they could distinguish nothing in the lane, and were indebted to Mr. Collins for the knowledge of what carriages went along, and how often, especially, Mr. Vorrow drove by in her phaeton, which he never failed coming to inform them of. Though it happened almost every day, she not infrequently stopped at the parsonage, and had a few minutes' conversation with Charlotte, but was scarcely ever prevailed on to get out. Very few days passed in which Mr. Collins did not walk to Rosings, and not many in which his wife did not think it necessary to go likewise, until Elizabeth recollected that there might be other family livings to be disposed of. She could not understand the sacrifice of so many hours. Now and then they were honoured to call from her ladyship, and nothing escaped her observation that was passing in the room during these visits. She examined into their employments, looking at their work, and advised them to do it differently, found fault with the arrangement of their furniture, or detected the housemaid in negligence, and if she accepted any refreshment, seemed to do it only for the sake of finding out that Mrs. Collins's joints of meat were too large for her family. What does that mean? Elizabeth soon perceived that though this great lady was not in the commission of the peace for the country, she was a most active magistrate in her own parish, the minutest concerns of which were carried to her by Mr. Collins, and whenever any of the cottagers were disposed to be quarrelsome, discontented, or too poor, she sallied forth into the village to settle their differences, silence their complaints, and scold them into harmony and plenty. Okay, that's nice. Their entertainment of dining at Rosings was repeated about twice a week, and allowing for the loss of Sir William, and there being only one card table in the evening, every such entertainment was the counterpart of the first. I don't know what that means. Their other engagements were few, as the style of living of the neighbourhood in general was beyond the Collinses' reach. This, however, was no evil to Elizabeth. Is that saying, like, it's a super rich neighborhood and they're not quite rich enough for it? This, however, was no evil to Elizabeth, and upon the whole, she spent her time comfortably enough. There were half hours of pleasant conversation with Charlotte, and the weather was so fine for the time of year that she had often great enjoyment out of doors. Her favourite walk, and where she frequently went while others were calling upon Lady Catherine, was along the open grove which edged that side of the park, where there is a nice sheltered path, which no one seemed to value but herself, and where she felt beyond the reach of Lady Catherine's curiosity. Oh, I hope we went into Darcy. He is here, right? We are in the same place where he is. In this quiet way, the first fortnight of her visit soon passed away. Easter was approaching, and the week preceding it was to bring an addition to the family at Rosings, which, in so small a circle, must be important. Elizabeth had heard soon after her arrival that Mr. Darcy was expected there in the course of a few weeks, and though there were not many of her acquaintance whom she did not prefer, his coming would furnish one comparatively new to look at in their Rosings parties, and she might be amused in seeing how hopeless Miss Bingley's designs on her were by his behaviour to his cousin, for whom he was evidently destined by Lady Catherine, who talked of his coming with the greatest satisfaction, spoke of him in terms of the highest admiration, and seemed almost angry to find that he had already been frequently seen by Miss Lucas and herself. I did not know that they are cousins, so that extra, I mean, I know that he's going to get with Lizzie eventually, but that extra makes me not fond of the arrangement. But yeah, this is gonna be great. This is even better. Well, I don't know if it's better, but it's I was gonna say this is even better than just running into him on the road, because there's more drama, but that could be its own fun drama too. And this is even better than, like, coming with the whole party with Mr. Bingley. It's just Darcy coming over. I'm excited to see him, like, not lavish any affection on Lady Catherine's daughter and stuff like that, and hopefully, it will be so great if he views them exactly the same way Lizzie does, because I bet he does. I bet he dislikes them as much as she does. Alright, his arrival was soon known at the parsonage, for Mr. Collins was walking the whole morning within view of the lodges opening into Hunsford Lane, in order to have the earliest assurance of it, and after making his bow as the carriage turned into the park, hurried home with the great intelligence. What? I don't know what that means. It sounds like, yes, he hurried home with the great intelligence, the AI beside him, you know? I don't know if it means, like, the intelligence of something specific. On the following morning, he hastened to Rosings to pay his respects. There were 2 nephews of Lady Catherine to require them, for Mr. Darcy had brought with him a Colonel Fitzwilliam, the younger son of his uncle, Lord Redacted. Lord Redacted, and to the great surprise of all the party, when Mr. Collins returned, the gentleman accompanied him. Charlotte had seen them from her husband's room, crossing the road, and immediately running into the other, told the girls what an honour they might expect, adding, "And I thank you, Eliza, for this piece of civility. Mr. Darcy would never have come so soon to wait upon me." So hold on a second. So is his name not Fitzwilliam? I thought that our Mr. Darcy's name was Fitzwilliam, but is it actually somebody else? I'm a little confused about the relations here as well. Especially with that. Why is his name redacted? Lord. Oh my goodness. I am going to keep calling him Lord Redacted, because I don't know how else to say that. I'm not going to say Lord Dash, and I think saying Lord Redacted is way more fun than Lord... And to the great surprise, you know. Elizabeth had scarcely time to disclaim all rights to the compliment before their approach was announced by the doorbell, and shortly afterwards the 3 gentlemen entered the room. Colonel Fitzwilliam, who led the way, was about 30. Hey, an actual straightforward number. Nice. Not handsome. Just straight up, he doesn't look good. Colonel Fitzwilliam, who led the way, was about 30, not handsome, but in person and address most truly the gentleman. Mr. Darcy looked just as he had been used to look in Hertfordshire. Yeah, Mr. Darcy looks like Mr. Darcy. That's awesome. Just as he had used to look in Hertfordshire, paid his compliments with his usual reserve to Mrs. Collins, and whatever might be his feelings towards her friend, met her with every appearance of composure. Elizabeth merely curtsied to him without saying a word. Colonel Fitzwilliam entered into conversation directly with the readiness and ease of a well-bred man, and talked very pleasantly. But his cousin, after having addressed a slight observation on the house and garden to Mrs. Collins, sat for some time without speaking to anybody. Is this Darcy, or is this the third guy? At length, however, his civility was so far awakened as to inquire Elizabeth after the health of her family. Okay, that sounds like Darcy. She answered him the usual way, and after a moment's pause, added, "My eldest sister has been in town these 3 months. Have you never happened to see her there?" She was perfectly sensible that he never had, but she wished to see whether he would betray any consciousness of what had passed between the Bingleys and Jane, and she thought he looked a little confused as he answered that he had never been so fortunate as to meet Miss Bennet. The subject was pursued no farther, and the gentleman soon afterwards went away. What do you mean he went away? I want more! I want more than that. I was gonna stop after that, but now that Darcy's here, I want to keep going. Yeah, I can keep going. Let's do it. Alright, chapter 31, question mark, part 2, or volume 2, chapter 8. Colonel Fitzwilliam's manners were very much admired at the parsonage, and the ladies all felt that he must add considerably to the pleasure of their engagements at Rosings. It was some days, however, before they received any invitation thither, for while there were visitors in the house, they could not be necessary, and it was not till Easter Day, almost a week after the gentleman's arrival, that they were honoured by such an attention, and that then they were merely asked on leaving church to come there in the evening. For the last week they had seen very little of either Lady Catherine or her daughter. Colonel Fitzwilliam had called at the parsonage more than once during the time, but Mr. Darcy they had only seen at church. It's interesting how they've never mentioned church. As far as I remember, they haven't mentioned church. Of course they've mentioned the parsonage, but, you know, I do think that it very likely was just the norm back then that, yeah, you are expected to go to church, like, every Sunday. But I guess it was such a norm that, you know, the author doesn't even need to mention it. But it's just like, now I'm like, oh, yeah, they go to church. The invitation was accepted, of course, and at a proper hour they joined the party in Lady Catherine's drawing room. Her ladyship received them civilly, but it was plain that their company was by no means so acceptable as when she could get nobody else, and she was in fact almost engrossed by her nephews, speaking to them, especially to Darcy, much more than to any other person in the room. I don't know what that means, by no means so acceptable as when she could get nobody else. I guess it's saying, like, oh, like, it's not just like, oh, I'm happy, like, I'm receiving you, I'm welcoming you because I don't have anybody else. And it's like, no, like, I am full on welcoming you. I like that you're here, I think. And maybe Elizabeth is more that former category. Colonel Fitzwilliam seemed really glad to see them. Anything was a welcome relief to him at Rosings, and I don't know what that means. What do you mean anything was a welcome relief? Anyways. And Mrs. Collins... Mrs. Collins' pretty friend had moreover caught his fancy very much. What? Oh, does that mean the, you know, Miss DeBorrow, the daughter? He now seated himself by, oh, maybe it's Elizabeth. He now seated himself by her and talked so agreeably of Kent and Hertfordshire, of travelling and staying at home, of new books and music, that Elizabeth had never been half so well entertained in that room before. And they conversed with so much spirit and flow as to draw the attention of Lady Catherine herself, as well as Mr. Darcy. his eyes had been soon and repeatedly turned towards them with a look of curiosity, and that her ladyship, after a while, shared the feeling, was more openly acknowledged, for she did not scruple to call out. "What is it you are saying, Fitzwilliam? What is it you are talking of? What are you telling Miss Bennet? Let me hear what it is." Oh, my goodness. Oh, she has quite the manner. "What are you saying? What are you talking of? What are you telling her?" "We are speaking of music, madam," said he, when no longer able to avoid a reply. "Of music? Then pray speak aloud. It is of all subjects my delight. I must have my share in the conversation." Do you really have to, though? Is there a conversation? "I must have made my share of the conversation, if you are speaking of music. There are few people in England, I suppose, who have more true enjoyment of music than myself, or a better natural taste. If I have ever learned, I should have been a great proficient." So it's like, I'm the best at music. I love it so much. I never learned anything about it. That's very much like what Colin said the other day, right? Where I can't remember. Was it about music? It might have been. Where he was like, going on this grand speech about music, and then he, like, doesn't know anything about it and isn't actually offering anything helpful. Hey, we got her name. Okay. "And so would Anne, if her health had allowed her to apply. I am confident that she would have performed delightfully. How does Georgiana get on, Darcy?" Okay, now I'm not sure okay, well, I'll continue. I'm not sure which name is the daughter. Mr. Darcy spoke with affectionate praise to his sister's proficiency. Okay, they might have said her name earlier and I forgot, but okay, so Georgiana is his sister and Anne is Miss Deborah. "I am very glad to hear such a good account of her," said Lady... What is that? Oh, yeah. I thought that was a quote. It's just like some dirt on the page, but it's like Lady Catherine. Suddenly we have an imposter. Said Lady Catherine, "And pray tell her from me that she cannot expect to excel if she does not practice a great deal." "I assure you, madam," he replied, "that she does not need such advice. She practices very constantly." "So much the better. It cannot be done too much, and when I next write to her, I shall charge her not to neglect it on any account. I often tell young ladies that no excellence in music is to be acquired without constant practice. I have told Miss Bennet several times that she will never play really well unless she practices more, and though Mrs. Collins has no instrument, she is very welcome, and I've often told her to come to Rosings every day and play on the pianoforte in Mrs. Jenkinson's room. She would be in nobody's way, you know, in that part of the house." So, granted, her advice ain't bad, but again, she's just giving it unsolicited to everybody, and so it's like, yeah, I'd always say that you need to practice. I tell my daughter to practice. I tell your sister to practice. I've only met Elizabeth. I tell her to practice, and she doesn't really even play that much. And I tell Charlotte, who has never expressed any interest in playing an instrument, also to practice. Mr. Darcy looked a little ashamed of his aunt's ill breeding and made no answer. So am I interpreting that correct? That, yeah, he is thinking ill of Lady Catherine, just as our Lizzie is. Interesting that it's ill breeding. That ill breeding is the issue here, because she seems like a noble of good birth. When coffee was over, Colonel Fitzwilliam reminded Elizabeth of having promised to play to him, and she sat down directly to the instrument. He drew a chair near her. Lady Catherine listened to half a song, and then talked as before. Oh, so she's all interested in music and telling her to practice, and then when she does practice, she doesn't even listen. And then talked as before to her other nephew, who, random other nephew we haven't heard much about, unless it's Mr. Darcy. Until the latter walked away from her, and moving with his usual deliberation towards the pianoforte, stationed himself so as to command a full view of the fair performer's countenance. Okay, that is Darcy. Elizabeth saw what he was doing, and at the first convenient pause, turned to him with an arch smile and said, "You mean to frighten me, Mr. Darcy, by coming in all this state to hear me. But I will not be alarmed, though your sister does play so well." "How do you know? You've never met her." "There's a stubbornness about me that never can bear to be frightened at the will of others. My courage always rises with every attempt to intimidate me." I just love this image of, like, Mr. Darcy notices she's playing the piano, and he, like, comes to sit by her just to, like, listen and look at how pretty she is. And then, she's just like, "Oh, are you trying to intimidate me?" And he just has hard eyes. Not really, no. "I shall not say that you're mistaken," he replied, "because you could not really believe me to entertain any design of alarming you, and I have had the pleasure of your acquaintance long enough to know that you find great enjoyment in occasionally professing opinions which, in fact, are not your own." Ooh, so he's kind of, reversing her a bit and being like, "You don't actually think that." I think she does, though. I think she does think he's trying to intimidate her. Or, she thinks ill of him. And it's interesting that he thinks that, I can't believe I don't think you'd ever really entertain that I could alarm you. Elizabeth laughed heartily at this picture of herself and said to Colonel Fitzwilliam, "Your cousin will give you a very pretty notion of me, and teach you not to believe a word I say. I am particularly unlucky in meeting with a person so well able to expose my real character, in part of the world where I had hoped to pass myself off with some degree of credit. Indeed, Mr. Darcy, it is very ungenerous in you to mention all that you knew to my disadvantage in Hertfordshire, and give me leave to say, very impolitic too, for it is provoking me to retaliate, and such things may come out as will shock your relations to hear." "I'm not afraid of you," said he, smilingly. Oh, I love that! I love that so much. Hang on a second, let me go over what she said again. Yeah, so she's saying, like, yeah, you're trying to turn me against Fitzwilliam and make him think ill of me. And I think she's kind of being sarcastic and saying, like, I'm particularly unlucky in meeting with a person so well able to expose my real character. I think she's being like, oh yeah, you totally got me, when she doesn't think that he did. But it does seem generous genuine when she's saying, like, oh yeah, like, you shouldn't be talking about what you knew of me before, to new people. And yeah, he totally is trying to get her to retaliate, I think. I'm not afraid of you, said he, smilingly. Pray let me hear what you have to accuse him of, cried Colonel Fitzwilliam. I should like to know how he behaves among strangers. Okay, I didn't take her words as accusing him. Well, I guess she is accusing him of being like, oh, you're trying to get me on the defensive kind of thing. You shall hear them, but prepare yourself for something very dreadful. The first time... Oh, I like this. So now he gets to hear what she thinks of him. The first time of my ever seeing him in Hertfordshire, you must know, was at a ball. And at this ball, what do you think he did? He danced only 4 dances. I am sorry to pain you, but so it was. I love that that's the first insult she comes out of the gate with, that it's like, we went to a ball, and guess what? He danced only 4 dances. The scandal. He danced only 4 dances, though gentlemen were scarce, and to my certain knowledge, more than one young lady was sitting down in want of a partner. Mr. Darcy, you cannot deny the fact. I had not at that time the honor of knowing any lady in the assembly beyond my own party. This goes back to what I said during that chapter, which, yeah, he just seems introverted. He's like, I didn't know anybody. I didn't want to dance with people I didn't know. I just wanted to sit in my corner. True, and nobody can ever be introduced in a ballroom. I don't know if she's being sarcastic with that or not, because I'm still a little confused on how the introductions work. Well, Colonel Fitzwilliam, what do I play next? My fingers wait your orders. I like that. Perhaps, said Darcy, I should have judged better had I sought an introduction, but I am ill qualified to recommend myself to strangers. Okay, I think I read that a little off. Let me reread it. I should have judged better. Oh, I think it's that. I read that as like, oh, like, it's just the old phrasing of it. But anyways, I should have judged better had I sought an introduction, but I am ill qualified to recommend myself to strangers. Shall we ask your cousin the reason of this? Said Elizabeth, still addressing Colonel Fitzwilliam. Shall we ask him why a man of sense and education, and who has lived in the world, is ill qualified to recommend himself to strangers? I can answer your question, said Fitzwilliam, without applying it to him. It is because he will not give himself the trouble. I certainly have not the talent, which some people possess, said Darcy, of conversing easily with those I have never seen before. I cannot catch their tone of conversation, or appear interested in their concerns, as I often see done. My fingers, said Elizabeth, do not move over this instrument in the masterly manner which I see so many women's do. They have not the same force or rapidity, and do not produce the same expression. But then I have always supposed it to be my own fault, because I would not take the trouble of practicing. It is not that I do not believe my fingers as capable as any other woman's of superior execution. Okay, interesting. So he's saying, like, he's basically saying, I'm an introvert and I'm no good at talking to people that I don't know. And then she is like, you just haven't practiced that I'm not, like, my fingers are the same as any other person's fingers, and they have the same, like, capability of playing the piano, but other people are better at it because they've practiced, and so you need to practice talking, bud. But I like that she went, like, metaphorical on him. Darcy smiled and said, You are perfectly right. You have employed your time much better. No one admitted to the privilege of hearing you No one admitted to the privilege of hearing you can think anything wanting. We neither of us perform to strangers. Oh, I like that line, that it's like, you sound great, but you don't perform in front of strangers. And so he's saying that's how he is too. It's like, yeah, if I talk to people I know, then I can be a great conversationalist, but I don't talk to strangers. Here they were interrupted by Lady Catherine, who called out to know what they were talking about. You can just imagine her from across the room. What are you talking about? What are you speaking of? What are you conversing about? Elizabeth immediately began playing again. Lady Catherine approached, and after listening for a few minutes, said to Darcy, Miss Bennet would not play at all amiss if she practised more, and could have the advantage of a London master. She has a very good notion of fingering, though her taste is not equal to Anne's, and would have been a delightful performer had her health allowed her to learn. I feel like she's going to use that excuse a lot, that she would have been the best of the best had her health not, stopped her. Because I feel like, I don't know what condition she has, but I feel like, even if you're sick, you can play the piano. Elizabeth looked at Darcy to see how cordially he assented to... What is happening? There we go. Elizabeth looked at Darcy to see how cordially he assented to his cousin's praise. But neither at that moment, nor at any other, could she discern any symptom of love, and from the whole of his behaviour to Mr. Borrow, she derived this comfort for Miss Bingley, that he might have been just as likely to marry her, had she been his relation. Wait, hold on. So first of all, I love symptom of love, and I kind of want to submit that as a prompt now, because that's pretty great. And yeah, he's not gonna show any symptoms of love, but he's showing plenty to you, and you don't notice. Let's see. Oh, that, okay, yeah. But it's weird. I don't like the had she been his relation. Like, I guess maybe this was the time where marrying your cousins was normal, but they don't do that. Now, well, once so far, explicitly, there was an option to marry a cousin, and it was, overruled in favor of not a cousin. And I know it's going to happen again, because Mr. Darcy is not going to marry his cousin. So, it's hard to tell if it's like, oh, this is normal and acceptable at the time this was written, or if it's like, whether or not it was at the time, Jane Austen is going, like, yeah, no, I think it's gross, so my characters aren't going to do that. But this is quite the statement to be like, like, that cousins are more likely to marry each other, or should, like, that's even more icky, if I'm reading that right. Anyways, Lady Catherine continued her remarks on Elizabeth's performance, mixing with them many instructions on execution and taste. Elizabeth received them with all the forbearance of civility, and at the request of the gentleman remained at the instrument till her ladyship's carriage was ready to take them all home. Oh, I don't want to stop. Oh. Yep, I see Darcy in the next chapter. It's like I've been deprived of Darcy content in favor of Collins content lately, and now that I have it, I'm like, I don't want to stop. I want to keep going. So the next chapter is not that long, so I think I'm gonna give in to my cravings. Chapter 32, Volume 2, Chapter 9. Elizabeth was sitting by herself the next morning and writing to Jane, while Mrs. Collins and Maria were gone on business into the village, where she was startled by a ring at the door, and the certain signal of a visitor. As she had heard no carriage, she thought it not unlikely to be Lady Catherine, and out of that apprehension was putting away her half-finished letter that she might escape all impertinent questions. When the door opened, and to her very great surprise, Mr. Darcy, and Mr. Darcy only, entered the room. Oh, hell yeah! That's even better than I thought. He seemed astonished, too, on finding her alone, and apologized for his intrusion, by letting her know that he had understood all the ladies to be within. They then sat down, and when her inquiries after Rosings were made, seemed in danger of sinking into total silence. It was absolutely necessary, therefore, to think of something, and in this emergence, recollecting when she had seen him last in Hertfordshire, and feeling curious to know what he would say on the subject of their hasty departure, she observed, "How very suddenly you all quitted Netherfield last November, Mr. Darcy. It must have been a most agreeable surprise to Mr. Bingley to see you all after him so soon, for if I recollect right, he went but the day before. He and his sisters were well. I hope, when you left for London." "Perfectly so, I thank you." And she found that she was to receive no other answer, and after a short pause added, "I think I have understood that Mr. Bingley has not much idea of ever returning to Netherfield again. I've never heard him say so, but it is probable that he may spend very little of his time there in the future. He has many friends, and he's at a time of life when friends and engagements are continually increasing. If he means to be but little at Netherfield, it would be better for the neighbourhood that he should give up the place entirely, for then we might possibly get a settled family there. But perhaps Mr. Bingley did not take the house so much for the convenience of the neighbourhood as for his own, and we must accept him to keep or quit it on the same principle." "I should not be surprised," said Darcy, "if he were to give it up as soon as any eligible purchase offers." Elizabeth made no answer, and she was afraid of talking longer of his friend, and having nothing else to say, was now determined to leave the trouble of finding a subject to him. I mean, like, I don't know if it's rude, but I feel like you should ask about, like, does he like Jane? Like, I don't know, you could find some polite way to get it in there and ask, what's the deal with him and Jane? He took the hint and soon began with, "This seems a very comfortable house. Lady Catherine, I believe, did a great deal to it when Mr. Collins first came to Hunsford." "I believe she did, and I'm sure she could not have bestowed her kindness on a more grateful object. Mr. Collins appears very fortunate in his choice of a wife." "Yes, indeed. His friends may well rejoice in his having met with one of the very few sensible women who would have accepted him, or have made him happy if they had. My friend has an excellent understanding, though I am not certain that I consider her marrying Collins as the wisest thing she ever did. She seems perfectly happy, however, and in a prudential light, it is certainly a very good match for her." Oh, okay, she's just saying it's a very prudent match. "It must be very agreeable to her to be settled within so easy a distance of her own family and friends." "An easy distance, do you call it? It is near 50 miles. I was gonna say, I thought that was pretty far." "And what is 50 miles of good road? Little more than half a day's journey. Yes, I call it a very easy distance." "I should have considered the distance as one of the advantages of the match." I should never have considered the distance as one of the advantages of the match," cried Elizabeth. "I should never have said Mrs. Collins was settled near her family." "It is proof of your own attachment to Hertfordshire. Anything beyond the very neighbourhood of Longbourn, I suppose, would appear far." So is he calling her a country bumpkin? You love your little country town. You're not experiencing the wide world. As he spoke, there was a sort of smile, which Elizabeth fancied she understood. He must be supposing her to be thinking of Jane in Netherfield, and she blushed as she answered. Why is that making her blush? What? I'm confused. Does she think that he likes Jane? What? I do not mean to say that a woman may not be settled too near her family. Or, wait a second. Is he calling Jane a country bumpkin? Or does she think that he's calling Jane a country bumpkin? Maybe. No. Oh, I think I get it. So he must be supposing her to be thinking of Jane in Netherfield. So I guess what she's thinking is she loves her sister too much. She doesn't want to leave. And so I think I might be misunderstanding still. I do not mean to say that a woman may not be settled too near her family. The far and the near must be relative, and depend on many varying circumstances. Where there is fortune to make the expense of travelling unimportant, distance becomes no evil. But that is not the case here. Mr. and Mrs. Collins have a comfortable income, but not such a one as will allow of frequent journeys. I am persuaded my friend would not call herself near her family under less than half the present distance. Mr. Darcy drew his chair a little towards her and said, "You cannot have a right to such very strong local attachment. You cannot have been always at Longbourn." Elizabeth looked surprised. The gentleman experienced some change of feeling. He drew back his chair, took a newspaper from the table, and, glancing over it, said in a colder voice, "Are you pleased with Kent?" Wait, so is he saying, like, stop talking for Charlotte. This is about you. This is how you think. But I don't know, because he's speaking in negatives. Like, he's speaking of you cannot have a right to such very strong local attachment. I don't know. Elizabeth looked surprised. The gentleman experienced some change of feeling. He drew back in his chair, took an I already read this. From the table, and glancing over it, said in a colder voice, "Are you pleased with Kent?" A short dialogue on the subject of the country ensued, on either side, calm and concise, and put an end to by the entrance of Charlotte and her sister, just returned from their walk. A tete-a-tete surprised them. Mr. Darcy related the mistake which had occasioned his intruding on Miss Bennet, and after sitting a few minutes longer without saying much to anybody, went away. That definitely... Wait, so am I understanding that right? That he comes in, and he sees Elizabeth, and he looks surprised, and he's like, I thought all the ladies were going to be here. And so they sit together, and talk while he's waiting for the other ladies to arrive. And then when the other ladies do arrive, he leaves. Kind of makes it clear you were here to see Elizabeth. What can be the meaning of this? Said Charlotte, as soon as he was gone. My dear Liza, he must be in love with you, or he would have never called on us in this familiar way. You're seeing it. I don't think Lizzie's gonna, but it's true. So maybe she did see exactly what I just saw. But when Elizabeth told of his silence, it did not seem very likely, even to Charlotte's wishes, to be the case. And after various conjectures, they could at last only suppose his visit to proceed from his difficulty on finding anything to do, which was the more probable from the time of the year. That seems like a weak argument, that it's like, all she says is, oh, but he was like really quiet. And it's like, you should know Darcy well enough at this point to know that he's like that. I've barely known him, and I know that makes sense, that he's quiet. So it's just like, wow, like, so he came to the house, and he said he was here for all the ladies, but he talked to you, and then after we came down, he left. Kind of seems like he's in love with you. Oh, but, like, there were long stretches of silence. Well, can't be that. It's like, no. Probably just bored and came to hang out. Guys. Oh, my goodness. All field sports were over. I don't think of this. Now I'm just imagining, like, oh, yeah, like the football, it's not football season, so he's got nothing to do. Oh, my goodness. Within doors, there was Lady Catherine, books, and a billiard table, but gentlemen cannot be always within doors. And then the nearness of the parsonage, or the pleasantness of the walk to it, or the people who lived in it, the two cousins found a temptation from this period of walking thither almost every day. They called at various times of the morning, sometimes by their aunt. It was plain to them all that Colonel Fitzwilliam came because he had pleasure in their society, a persuasion which of course recommended him still more. Elizabeth was reminded by her own satisfaction in being with him, as well as by his evident admiration of her former favourite, George Wickham, and though, in comparing them, she saw there was less captivating softness in Colonel Fitzwilliam's manners, she believed he might have the best informed mind. Yeah, this is interesting, that she keeps encountering just random nice gentlemen who it's like, maybe he could be an option to marry, and it's like, it's not the one for you, Lizzie. You need somebody who can actually match you, and he is matching you, as in every conversation you had. Oh, there is an ad break. I never know what to do during the ad breaks when the kitties aren't around to admire. Okay, not much left. Oh, but I'm very satisfied with the Darcy content that we are receiving. I think this will be a good place to hit the pause after we had that good one-on-one conversation with just the two of them. That was great. That was pretty much what I was hoping for with the like she's going for a walk and suddenly he's there. It's pretty much that, but just at the house. So I got both. I got both him arriving at the Lady Catherine's place for dinner and the surprise meeting. So this has been great. And back. Okay. But why Mr. Darcy came so often to the parsonage, it was more difficult to understand. It could not be for society, as he frequently sat there 10 minutes together without opening his lips, and when he did speak, it seemed the effect of necessity rather than of choice, a sacrifice to propriety, not a pleasure to himself. He seldom appeared really animated. Mrs. Collins knew not what to make of him. Colonel Fitzwilliam's occasionally laughing at his stupidity proved that he was generally different, which her own knowledge of him could not have told her. I think Fitzwilliam might know that he's in love with her. Okay, so interesting. So I might have been wrong there. I was thinking he's quiet and introverted and stuff, but maybe he's just awkward because he likes her, and so he doesn't know what to say. That's even cuter. But I love, like, if Colonel Fitzwilliam knows and he's just, like, laughing in the corner, like, not revealing the truth. Colonel Fitzwilliam was occasionally laughing at his stupidity, proved that he was generally different, which her own knowledge of him could not have told her. And as she would have liked to believe this changed the effect of love, and the object of that love, her friend Eliza... I thought we were in Eliza's perspective. So what? Hold on. Did it say? Okay. Because, like, yeah, Elizabeth was reminded of, George Wickham. So Elizabeth is all that part. Yeah, that seemed like it was in Elizabeth's perspective. Okay. Which her own knowledge of him could not have told her, and she would have liked to believe this changed the effect of love, and the object of that love, her friend Eliza. She set herself seriously to work to find it out. She watched him whenever they were at Rosings, and whenever he came to Hunsford, but without much success. He certainly looked at her friend a great deal, but the expression of that look was disputable. It was an earnest, steadfast gaze, but she often doubted whether there was much admiration in it, and sometimes it seemed nothing but absence of mind. She had once or twice suggested to Elizabeth the possibility of his being partial to her. Elizabeth always laughed at the idea, and Mrs. Collins did not think it right to press the subject, from the danger of raising expectations, which might only end in disappointment. For in her opinion, it admitted not... For in her opinion, it admitted not of a doubt that all her friend's dislike would vanish if she could suppose him to be in her power. I don't know if that's true, but that's funny. It's like, oh, I have power over him? Okay, I kind of like him now. In her kind schemes for Elizabeth, she sometimes planned her marrying Colonel Fitzwilliam. He was beyond comparison the pleasantest man. He certainly admired her, and his situation in life was most eligible, but to counterbalance these advantages, Mr. Darcy had considerable patronage in the church, and his cousin could have none at all. That weird place to end. I thought it was just going to say, Mr. Darcy's really rich already, because we have established that he makes more than Mr. Bingley does, or has more. Oh, that was so good. Charlotte is an interesting character because, as Elizabeth said, her marrying Collins, I don't know, is the wisest decision, or at least, for her own happiness. But, she is right. She is right about Darcy. And I love, again, I doubt that the movies would go this direction, but I love the idea of Mr. Darcy just, hanging out. And then there's Charlotte in the bushes with binoculars being like, what's he doing? Does he like her? And I love that it's it could be because he likes her, but also maybe he's just bored. Maybe he's just zoning out. Again, that feels like Darcy. Oh, but that's awesome, and again, really funny that she's like, I know she dislikes him, but if she thinks he's in her power, I think she's gonna like him, and I am curious if that's how it's gonna go. I kind of hope it doesn't. I kind of hope that she falls in love with him on her own, or she realizes that he's in love with her on her own, and instead of having that 180, that she grows to love him, over time. But I don't know. We've got a decent... maybe I can't show it. Let's see. that's where we are. So we're around halfway, which, you know, makes sense for volume 2. But it totally makes sense that, you know, somebody in Elizabeth's sphere noticing, hey, he might be in love with you, is the halfway point or around there. That definitely makes sense. So I definitely am curious to see how Elizabeth is going to find out or admit it and everything. But yeah, like, that's so cute that he just keeps coming to the house and, like, trying to talk to her, and then he's just quiet and doesn't know what to say. Oh, adorable. I love it. I ate well today. I was well fed today. This is the content I want from this book. This is what I signed up for, not Collins being a weirdo. Oh yeah, so I really didn't make many predictions about Lady Catherine. And I was kind of like, I don't know, I was torn because I just created an image of her in my head from what he said, and, you know, I created this very pleasant, noble image of her. And I did have a thought in my mind where I was like, his image of her might be wrong, but I didn't realize how wrong it was gonna be. Like, it's kind of, I they didn't really even describe this, but the image I get is like going from like, ah yes, noble king to, and I wish I knew his name, but you know, like that scene in Lord of the Rings where there's that king who's just like eating chicken legs and like it's just kind of gross and there's all the gobbling noises. That's basically what it seems like. It goes from like, here's this image of this noble Lady Catherine de Bourgh, and then cut to her just like nomming on some chicken like grossly. Yeah, so like I kind of expected this and I kind of didn't. It's definitely different from the image I had in my head, but the image I had in my head was explicitly from Collins, so I very much knew that image could be wrong. So very interesting to actually meet her and everything and see what Charlotte's life is like with Collins, and I'm glad it's not terrible. I'm glad she's not coming to Lizzie being like, I'm miserable, you know. So that's great. And it is funny to know, like, Lady Catherine loves to be praised, and so he sings her praises across the country. But yeah, of course, the big standout is Mr. Darcy showing up. Another thing that I don't know if I've talked about much is that, like, so I was saying how I think one of the things that makes this book so enjoyable is the narrator, that the narrator, like, throwing shade and stuff like that makes it really dynamic and fun. Another thing that makes it really fun is that it seems like so much of the time, at least for me as a reader, that Elizabeth is thinking what I'm thinking. That all that all these other, like, it's kind of like what's like the comedy routine? Is it like straight man and funny man, something like that? But like it kind of feels like everybody else is the funny man, and then Elizabeth and Darcy are the straight men in the in the comedy act. That is the entire book. But yeah, like everybody else is having these I don't know, like wacky fun reactions, and then Elizabeth is so grounded that it's like, yeah, I am with you. So many times when she says something, I'm like, that is exactly what I was thinking, and that makes it really fun. Like, that makes her such an enjoyable main character. I can't remember if something someone said on a stream or something, like one of my relatives said that I remember somebody saying that they don't usually like main characters, but they really like Elizabeth. And I totally get that, you know, at this point, that she is a really great character, and she really does stand out with regards to the other characters in the book. Like, her and Mr. Darcy, I like the best, for sure. I knew I was gonna like Mr. Darcy the best, because he's just the kind of character I like. But yeah, I didn't know how I was gonna feel about Elizabeth, and I do really like her, and I think she's kind of like, the two of them are kind of like the foils to everybody else in the book, and everybody else, you know, having silly, over-the-top reactions and stuff like that. And they're, like I said, they're so grounded. And then, like I kind of mentioned before, Darcy matches her. He matches her energy and stuff like that. That everybody else is kind of like leagues below her. Like they're all the wackadoos, and she's the normal grounded person. And then he's the other normal grounded person, and he will respond accordingly. He will. Maybe I'm not giving the other characters enough credit. I mean, like Jane's pretty normal and stuff like that. But he like actually matches her energy, and when she's like, oh, like, you know, cause like, I don't know, with Lady Catherine, she pushes back against her a little bit. She's able to see through the I don't know, the ruse of nobility and be like, yeah, I don't really like you that much, but I'm still gonna be civil to you, but I'm also gonna push back where I can. And he's also, and she kind of does that, you know, with all the characters in a way that she's very composed and civil and stuff like that, but she is very good at like pushing back on things and having her own unique perspective on things. And so Darcy's the one that could do that to her and be like, oh, I'm gonna be civil to you, but I'm gonna push back. Though granted, maybe she wouldn't say that he's civil to her. And there have been a couple times where he wasn't. But currently he's being pretty civil. But yeah, so it just makes their dynamic really come alive. Like, not just in terms of, oh, they're great characters, but in terms of like, like I said, like they almost stand out as like foils to the rest of the book, and it's them against the world in a way. It's them against the world around them. That they are two very specific kinds of people in the world that they live in, and it just really makes them and their relationship shine and make it really interesting to read, and so I am definitely seeing what made this a classic, and I do not know how their relationship goes. I think I've seen like a little bit of a clip from one of the movies where they're like in the rain, and like I think they're like professing their love to each other like reluctantly. But I don't remember it very well, and I don't know how accurate it is to the book, but what was I saying? I'm not. I was saying I don't know how it goes. Yeah, so I really don't know, like, how she finds out that he's in love with her, or if she starts falling in love with him first, or you know, what exactly the situation is, other than potentially maybe they profess their love in the rain and reluctantly, which seems fitting. But yeah, I don't know if any of you are still here or if you're all asleep, but if any of you still are here, let me know who I should raid. I don't know if I'm nervous to just like go on Twitch and look for somebody to raid, but I guess I could do that. Hey, Death said, you are still here. Thanks for sticking with me. So yeah, if you have somebody in mind who I should raid, let me know, and I will do that. But this has been a great time. I have finally gotten the content that I have been wanting for so long. So, and yes, by the end, once Darcy showed up, that cleared. It was already clearing my mood, but once I got fully engaged in my good content, then that really did clear up my sour mood. So this was a good choice. I'm happy I did this. Might want to give that a try if you're angling to be a professional streamer. You mean just like go on Twitch and find some random person? Do you have any like recommendations for how to pick someone that fits? Because, you know, people don't really, as far as I know, read books on Twitch, and so I don't know like what to look for. Like, maybe I could pick a game that I like. Maybe no, not that. Let's see. Yeah, maybe I'll looks like there's somebody here streaming the game that I have been playing lately. So looks like they're a pretty small streamer, but hey, me too. So we can be maybe we can be friends. Yeah. Oh yeah, I could look for a story-based game too. Maybe I'll do that next time. Let's see. But yeah, so I've been playing the game Ender Lilies. So and it's not a very it's not a very popular game as far as I know, but it's very good. And so I just decided to look up somebody who's playing it. So yes, it's been a lovely time. I hope you have enjoyed it yourself. I will see you next time.